Hello, I'm James Ingram. This video 846 shows what is probably the easiest to understand method that we've so far been able to come up with to control 3 trains on one main line. This part 1 of 4 is a fast-forwarded copy of the contents of the rest of the video, parts 2, 3, and 4. So you can preview the entire video by watching just this first part, which lasts about 10 minutes. We're in video 1, but we're looking at the contents of video 2 here as a preview. We're fast forwarded 600%, so you won't hear any audio. As soon as that status light goes to red, it'll begin making a station departure announcement. There it's red. Now that train will go down the main line, stop at the whistle stop, pulling the 2 trains on the left forward in the yard. Now the main line train goes around the loop and comes in the back of the yard. Now it's making an announcement for the red train. It takes off, makes the whistle stop, pulls the 2 trains forward in the yard on the left, brings the mainline train around the loop, pulls it into the back of the yard. Now it's making an announcement for the yellow engine. That'll take off, get down to the whistle stop and stop, bring the 2 trains forward in the yard. The mainline train starts up again and comes around and pulls into the back of the yard. Now watch the status light, it changed back to green, so the system's ready to go again. Here's the same 3 train operation without the whistle stop. Notice the status light changed to red. Trains on the main line. 2 trains in the yard pull forward. Train comes in the back. Second train's on the main line. 2 trains in the yard get pulled forward. Second train pulls into the rear of the yard. Third train's on the main line. 2 trains in the yard get pulled forward. Third train comes in the back of the yard and stops. And notice the status light goes back to green. Here we are doing a detector test. We can tell by the rate that that red LED is blinking on the lower right corner of the control panel, whether it's blocked or unblocked. We just moved that train back in the rear in front of the detector to block it. In this way we can verify the detectors communicating with the control panel. Now here's 2 trains on the track. We've got the announcements turned off. We need to turn off switch 16, which tells the processor not to try to run the middle train. Now there's the first train going around the loop. Train in the yard gets pulled forward. Now the second train runs around the loop. Train in the back of the yard gets pulled forward. Second train comes around the loop, crosses into the yard, and notice the status light went back to green. Now here's 1 train on the track. We're making a station departure announcement. Turn off the switch for the engine we're not running. Push the start button, making the announcement. Train will take off in a second. There it goes. Makes its whistle stop. Starts up again. Completes its trip around the main line and comes into the yard. Watch the status light changes back to green. Now if we push the start button again to run that train just by itself, it'll take off again and go around. Now it's making the announcement, comes around. Now it's actually making the whistle stop a little further up the line because it started from back in the yard. We're still looking at video 1, but now we're looking at the contents of video 3 as a preview. Here we're demonstrating the announcements decoder, which makes station departure announcements. You can see that sitting toward the top of the screen near the crossover in the tracks. The controller can activate this thing automatically and make a station departure announcement when the train's ready to leave. Here we're looking at some of the other components, the status light, the command station, and the public push button, where the public can push this button to start the trains. Here we're looking at the control panel. Basically, we have the controller, that green board in the lower right, plus 3 Atlas slide switches, plus an Atlas momentary push button switch on the right. And this basically makes up the components on our control panel that operates this system. Here we're looking in more detail at the slide switches on the control panel. The buttons on the right control the repeating and the announcements. The buttons in the center control which of the 3 trains run, and in the buttons on the far left control which trains make a whistle stop. So we can have any or all 3 trains run, and any or all of them do whistle stops. Here we're walking back along to the rear of the layout, taking a closer look at the Z-Stuff infrared detector. These are handy to use because they have no connection to the track. They just sit alongside the track. You don't have to connect anything to the track. It's very convenient. You can pick them up and move them if you need to relocate them without having to fish a bunch of wires underneath the track or underneath the layout. We're still in video 1, but now we're looking at the contents of video 4 as a preview. Here's a parts list that lists the part numbers of some of the components you see being used in this video. Here's the logic diagram where we use coins to represent the trains pulling around to the whistle stop, moving them up in the yard. Again, the second train pulling to the whistle stop, third train pulling to the whistle stop, comes into the rear. Now we're back where we started again. In a minute, we'll do this without the whistle stop. There's the first one without the whistle stop, second train without the whistle stop, third train running without the whistle stop. So we're using coins to represent how these trains operate here. Now we're showing the logic for the previous video 845, which always had 1 train on the main line and 2 trains in the yard. This system had more action. We always had at least 1 train moving all the time, and we could have 2 optionally, but it's not quite as simple an operation to understand. But we're using this logic diagram to try to contrast both videos. Here's our flow chart, which is kind of a pictorial representation of how our commands work. You can see there's basically 3 columns at the top, 1 column for each of the 3 locomotives, and then down at the bottom is our repeater shutdown test, where the system decides whether it's supposed to keep going or quit, depending on whether the repeat switch is closed. And if you look closely at those boxes, it's all simple stuff. You can see we're either selecting Locos, or we're making an announcement, or we're delaying, or we're blowing the horn, or we're starting it up like a speed 8 or a speed 4, or we're stopping it at speed 0. So that's what again, this just gives us a simple way to view all the commands in a pictorial form. This is the command file, which is enclosed in the documentation in an open office type format that anybody can use OpenOffice or LibreOffice or Microsoft Word to open and edit and change themselves. We got a sheet here for what our configuration settings are on the controller. The first page shows some of the wiring hookups. In a minute, we'll probably go to, there's the third page, which is the commands to run the first logo, and there's 2 similar pages that have the commands for the second and third logo, and then finally at the end there's a page for the repeater shutdown test. You've just completed watching part 104, which showed the entire video fast forwarded. Video 2 shows the demonstrations in real time. Video 3 shows the components. And the last, video 4, shows the documentation.